Hey everybody, welcome to another Blender video, and this time I want to show you how to make some pretty cool toon shading or cel shading if you want to call that. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe and that bell button if you want to get notified about the content like this in the future. It's been some time since I've did a commentary video like this, and I have a very good reason for that. I was actually pretty busy with production of my course on 3D illustration that you might have heard about, and I'm happy to announce that it's basically ready. And if you go to the polygonrunway.com or click the link right here in the top right corner or the link in the description, you can see that this is still in early access. But if you scroll down and expand the content, you will see that the fourth and fifth episode are actually ready. So I just have to now update the page and fill some other content like 3 videos and asset pack, but the main content is there, and until I finish these little things and update my website, this will remain in the early access, so you can grab it with a substantial discount still. And as my YouTube subscriber, if you go to the checkout and click add a coupon and use Sushi Apprentice code, and you can find this in the description below, you just click apply and you get $20 off. That's amazing, right? So if you want to learn how to do 3D illustration like I do, how to do these dioramas like here, go check it out and let me know how you like it. Recently I've done this Star Wars inspired scene with the AT-AT walkers, and I wanted to try something a little bit different, so I was searching for methods how to do some toon shading, some cel shading, and I applied this to this animated scene, put it on the Instagram, and the comments just blew off with the request on how to do this, and that's basically why I'm doing this video. Yeah, so this is the animation you can see on the screen. You can see how there are these black outlines on the models and how everything is a little bit more flat shaded. Now let's break down the scene a little bit. So as you can see here, I have, let me rotate this. I have this original scene with the AT-AT walkers, with the toon shading and the outlines already applied. So yeah, if I play the animation, you can see there's some simple movement, and basically you can see there's some simple armature here to make the AT-ATs move. And this is all done by keyframing, so I don't have any rig here, I don't have any controls, any drivers. This is just the basic armature and the keyframing animation, so nothing too fancy here. And yeah, there's this firing of the laser, which if you look closer, that's just the cylinder with some strong emission, and it flies here and disappears. And I have some point lights here, if you look closer, and they have all different strength, and they're basically there just to add some interest and to create these nice colored gradients. And I use one of those point lights and animate it to support that shot fired effect there. So if you look closer, it's just the point light blinking there. Okay, so that's about the scene and the animation. And right now I can show you these shaders and how I actually got to the final result. So I have a new project in Blender, and this is basically just the camera and 2 point lights, and one of them is set to blue and the second one is a little bit warmer color. So yeah, if I go to the camera view and let's go with the Suzanne, the Blender monkey here. You can't go wrong with that. So yeah, let's apply some subdivision surface and some smooth shading. And if I look on the render view, this is how it looks like. And I went through a lot of sources and a lot of videos on how to do a toon shading and how to do this comic book style. rendering, and there are multiple solutions. Some of them are for EEVEE, some of them are for Cycles, and there is a bunch of information there, and I really went through that and picked the best pieces that worked for me. But first I want to show you what Blender offers in this manner, and for Cycles there are some default options how to do these things. So yeah, if we select our model, and let me actually move this to a new collection. Let's call this Cycles. Okay, and now if I create a new material for this, you will see it's the standard principles. Let's call this Toon. And right now I can go here and switch this to Toon BSDF. And nothing will change here. This is for Cycles, so we'll have to go to Cycles. So go to the render tab and switch this to Cycles. I already have it set to GPU. And right here you can see this is a little bit different, that there's that Toon shading right out the bat in Blender and in Cycles. So if I go to the shading tab, and let's switch this to rendered to the camera view, you can see we have a setup for Toon BSDF here, and you can play here with the size a little bit. And if you go larger, you're basically making the object more soft. And I think this is a very good shader and it looks great. If you want to make this more interesting, you can see that there are two options here, and you can use the glossy mode for this shader, which will produce like a more metallic effect here, which is good for chrome materials or something like that. But let's go back to the diffuse. But you can duplicate this, switch to glossy, and you can actually mix these two. Let me use the Wrangler here. So we can use a mix shader here, set up the glossy and diffuse Toon BSDF, and mix between them to create some more highlights. So you can use those nice sharp highlights there from the glossy and mix them in. So you can always do something like this. And if you go to the render settings, you can see that there's a freestyle option there. That's basically a post-production effect for making the outlines. So if you check that and just hit F12, this should render, and you can see you have a nice outline there. Now let me close this, and if you want to modify the outline, you can always go to a view layer here, and if you have the freestyle active in the render settings, you can find it right down here, and there are a bunch of different options from the color of the stroke and the thickness of the stroke and anything you want basically. So you can play around with this freestyle a lot. So this is the default thing that the Blender offers, and it's for Cycles. So if you have just a single frame and you want to make some pretty poster design art that or something, you can use these Toon shaders. They are default in Blender, and you can use that freestyle post-production to create a really good result. Now let's switch back to EEVEE. Right here, I'll go to the layout, and I will duplicate this collection. Let me deactivate the original one, and we will copy the material right here, and we go to the shading. And right here, let me delete this, and let's add a simple diffuse shader. So right now we want to make this work in EEVEE, and we can actually use the shading information from this diffuse BSDF shader and map it onto the color ramp. So, and all of these techniques in the EEVEE, when it comes to Toon shading and cel shading, they're all around this one node, and that's called, if you go to the converter and shader to RGB, this is the one node because it converts the shader result to a color information that you can further modify. So we can now add a converter, color ramp, And right now you can see we just made this black and white, and you could play with the contrast here to adjust the shading some more, but the key thing right here will be switching from linear to constant, and that will allow us to create these sharp edges. And if you move this right here, you will see you have some nice posterized rendering right away. And you can of course add some more steps to this, so you can create some midtones with this, and you can of course apply color. So let me just switch to something here, and I think this looks completely amazing. And you can see it's all real time, so if you move the monkey around the lights, this works perfectly. And I really love this result. I could end right here, and this is beautiful Toon shading right there, and it can be combined with the post-processing effect. So if you go to the rendering and render this again, you can see it's instant because it's EEVEE, and the freestyle is pretty fast too, basically here. So you can achieve amazing results just by using this convert to RBG node and freestyle. The main problem with this one is that the color of the lights doesn't affect the object there or the shader. So basically all the color is controlled here in this color ramp, which is good if you, for example, have some restricted palette, illustration palette you're working on, or if you really want to create that poster effect with only few of the colors. But for this particular scene, I had something else in mind, so I started to play around with this technique, and also I wanted that real-time outline so I can see them in the viewport, and they're faster to render. So right now we can switch back to the layout, and let me duplicate this collection once again, disable this, and create a new copy of this material. So back to the shading. So how can we remix this to be able to read the information from the lighting and to have some smoother transitions here, but at the same time I wanted these lines. So first of all, let's make this black and white again. So we have some basically shading template for the later use. And right now what we can do is take this diffuse PSTF, duplicate this, and connect here. And right away you can see this is much better, I won't say better because it's the matter of taste, but this is much closer to what I was aiming for. There's still this shading step visible, but you can see some gradients there, some smoother shading, and this actually is affected by the color of the light. So there's blue here and there's this warm light there. So I think this works nicely. But this still wasn't enough for me because the black here is really strong and there's too much contrast going on. So, and if you would modify this color here, yeah, it just looks weird. So yeah, this still didn't work and I needed to modify it a little bit further. So what if I could just take the result of this shader here and the original shader and mix them, and that's exactly what I did. So let's just add a mix shader, right there, and I want to connect this here. This was really getting better, but I wanted to see if I can add another step right here, and if I can modify this factor here on that mix shader more dynamically. So let's add another color ramp right here, and first I want to switch this to constant and just set this to 0.5 value like that. And right now we'll connect this shader to RGB right there and plug it as a factor here. So we still should have basically the same result, because this is a 0.5, but not exactly, because the result of this has some highlight. So yeah, it's not completely the same thing. And one thing I wanted to do is to switch these, because yeah, this is the result I was going for. So yeah, right now if you slide this, you can actually create one more step right here, and I think it adds some more interest to this shader, makes it a little bit more sophisticated, like it's actually the comic book detailed drawing or some painting. So I really like that. And basically this is the final Toon shading setup from me, and this is the setup I used on these AT-ATs and the generator and every object in that scene. So yep, but the first one I've shown you, this is the great shader as well, but it's just for different purposes. And now let's get to the outline. And I saw some solution somewhere. Let me switch this back to the shader here, and let's go to layout. And I saw somewhere someone using this technique where you can use the backface culling on the material and the flip normals to actually show the outline around the object. So I was really intrigued by that, and basically what it does. And basically what it does, if you go into the edit mode here and duplicate the mesh, press enter, and you can stay in the same object or you can separate it outside. And of course, if you would use this in a scene, you probably would want to keep that in the same object, which can complicate things, which can complicate editing. So yeah, not a great method after all, but I want to show you the principle behind that. So if you duplicate the mesh, and right here you can use the shrink fatten. So yeah, you can just press Alt S and make this larger, and you can see here basically what outline you are creating. And right now just press Alt N for a normals menu, and you can flip them so they are pointing the other direction basically. And right now if you create a new material here, let's create new, and let's call this outline, and we'll just need the basic emission shader there with the black color. But the most important thing here is to go to the settings and enable backface culling. But first let me assign this. So yeah, we just enlarged, flipped normals, added the shader, and now if you enable backface culling, you're basically telling the render to not show you the back faces, and since you flipped normals, this is the result you see. So there's an object around this whole mesh, but since this is enabled and the normals are flipped, you are able to create an outline using this, which I thought was pretty awesome, but I don't like this technique. So let me just press X and delete all the vertices. And there's a better way how to do this. If you go to the modifiers and add the solidify modifier, that will do the same thing basically for you. So let's set thickness to something like -0.02 or even 0.03. And it has the flip normals option right here in the modifier, so you don't have to do that manually. And right now, since we added the material already, it's just about setting the material index offset, which is another amazing option for this modifier. And if you set that, you can see you have the same result. We can maybe go a little bit more subtle on this modifier here. Yeah, so this way you can create outline. Let me go to the render view. This way you can create a real-time outline by using just the procedural techniques, no mesh modifying, nothing. So I really like this option. And if you don't like some of these results or some of these parts here, me personally, I really like that because it gives it that more hand-drawn feel that I really wanted to achieve on that scene, on that animation. But if you don't like that, you can always do some vertex weight painting and create the group here and basically paint that thickness of the mesh generated. So yeah, you can certainly play around with this, but this is the best combination that I've come up with so far. And of course you can apply this here as well. You can just add that outline material, go to the modifier, add solidify, modify thickness, flip normals, and set the index. And on this kind of model and on this kind of shading, you might want to use maybe colored outline. And it's all real time, it's all in viewport. You can do animations with this stuff, so that's great. So right now you can better see why, let me go to the shading, why I've chosen this approach here with the shading, to have that violet lighting from the ambient light there, to have this color from these point lights on the object here, to really make some rich coloring to the scene. So yeah. Okay, so this is cel shading for you. Thank you for watching. Please let me know in the comments if you like this format of short explanations or scene breakdowns from me, and if you like to see more of that in the future. And yeah, if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe and that bell button if you want to get notified when I release something new. And again, thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.